Hello, everyone. So it is time for another episode of Lane One Making Waves. For today's episode, we have someone very, very special and near and dear to my heart, Coach Mark Bernardino. He is the associate head coach of the Wolfpack, Go Pack, and he is a 31-time ACC Head Coach of the Year award recipient, which is the most in ACC history. He is a longtime USA national coach, and he has most recently been inducted into the ISCA Hall of Fame and the ASCA Hall of Fame. So join along in our conversation. We touch on all things coaching from the age group level up until the collegiate level, how you can help your athletes, and also what to expect as a young athlete going into the world of collegiate swimming. So follow along and I hope you enjoy. Thank you again for meeting with me today. This is one of my favorite people on the planet. Coach Mark Bernardino has been a mentor to me for a very long time and is someone that is still such a prominent figure in my life. And I know that he's going to share a lot of wisdom for everyone watching today. So kind of getting into it, just touching on your coaching career and your philosophy. What first inspired you to get involved in coaching?
Wow, that is a great question. I didn't know that I would be involved in coaching. I'm the son of a coach. I'm the son of a wrestling coach. So, wrestling was my first sport, although it's not a sport I ever had the opportunity to pursue because my school didn't, any of the schools I attended, they didn't have wrestling. So, I got into age group swimming as a 10-year-old, swam in a YMCA program outside of Philadelphia, and just grew up doing what most young swimmers do, trying to progress into and through the sport and continually get better. I was an average swimmer up until my senior year of high school. And for whatever reasons, maybe all the hard work finally paid off, but I had a wonderful senior year in high school. I got recognized by some college coaches. I had the opportunity to be recruited and swim at the Division I level.
Mhm.
Um, I my parents wanted me, like most parents do, to learn how to swim, to know how to swim. No knowledge that I would wind up being a swimmer. Um, but what inspired me to get into coaching, I guess, being behind the scenes of coaching in my own household. And then when I got to college and I competed in college, I had a very positive relationship with my head coach. I admired him. Um, I loved how he took my athletic skills, as limited as they were, to a higher level than I could ever imagined I would reach. Um, I graduated with a degree in business
Mhm.
and went into the business world. I spent 2 years working for Procter and Gamble. After a couple of years, I felt as I just missed the sport so much. I missed competition. I missed pushing myself to high levels, physical levels. So I called my coach and said, I'd love to come back to grad school. Could I help you out? Could I be an assistant? And he said that would be wonderful. So I came back. I was his assistant. I had a small graduate stipend. Um, he gave me the opportunity to do everything. He gave me the opportunity to recruit. He gave me the opportunity to write practices. He gave me the opportunity to meet with and speak with swimmers. And through the 2 years that I was a graduate student, I knew that this is what I want to do.
Mhm.
Um, and so coaching became my life.
Yeah.
At age 26, I was named the head coach at the University of Virginia, and I was there for 35 years. So my dream of that being what I wanted to do came true. Now, the 1970s through the changes I've seen in sports from the 1970s, it's 47 or 48 years in the sport now at the collegiate level of coaching.
Mhm.
Wow. You talk about a big roller coaster. Um, the first women's program I worked with were among the very first women collegiate swimmers. We just celebrated 50 years of swimming at NC State. Virginia also celebrated their 50 years of women's swimming. That's how young our sport is
Yeah.
for women at the collegiate level. And to think that 50 years ago, I had the opportunity to be part of it. A short story in 1970, I believe it was the fall of 1973, maybe 72, we had two women swim on our men's team. Ellen Feldman, who went on to win a medal at the World University Games way back in the 70s, and Susan Allen. They literally trained with just the two of them, trained with and competed with the men's team.
Hmm.
And I'm sorry, Ellen may have been the first woman to ever compete in a men's meet when she swam against Wake Forest, um, way back when in the early 70s.
Yeah.
So you talk about seeing some really fun transitions and fun movement forward for female athletes. I feel like it was really fun to see how those two women impacted sport,
Yeah.
and many others. But for me, that was a big impact on my life because Susan was in my training lane,
Yeah.
and um, so it was really kind of neat knowing that she was in this all male environment. We became really, really good friends. Um, I felt like her big brother a lot of times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I mean, in the sport, it's so important to have those relationships and those mentorships and those opportunities. I know you spoke on how you kind of took a break from the sport for a little bit. I'm kind of in a similar situation. I mean, you graduate and you try to go into quote unquote the real world, but there's always a little piece of you that misses what swimming brought to your life, whether it's the competition, whether it's the camaraderie, the feeling of accomplishment. So I think a lot of people can relate to that. Kind of going back to your coaching journey, I know you mentioned you've been in the sport a long time and you've seen more than maybe anybody in the coaching world at this moment. How do you approach coaching as a whole? So has your philosophy to coaching kind of stayed the same? I know in college swimming, we see a lot of different coaches on the pool deck. You see the ones that are sprinting up and down the pool deck, kind of cheering like this, the ones on the sideline that are a little more reserved. You have um, coaches kind of just all over the spectrum. Where do you fall in there?
um, I would say I've probably touched on all those bases. There are times when I'm back and forth, up and down, running. I have been running up and down the pool deck trying to keep the swimmer going fast or staying on pace.
Yeah.
There are times when I'm more stoical, observing the race. Um, there are times when I want to sit down and cry during the course of a race, uh, or just "What are you doing?" kind of moment going
I've seen
on
those hands. I have seen
during
those hands.
uh, but encouraging the hands up, saying
Yeah.
you're doing a great job.
Hmm.
But what I've found out over the years, none of y'all saw that stuff anyhow. I think it makes the coach feel good to know he's involved in the race, but
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that you swimmers truly see
Coaches.
or truly, probably not a whole lot, right? You're focused, you're locked in. Hopefully you've strategized and
Mhm.
know know what your race strategy will be and you're trying to execute that. And if there's some way by having our arms up in the air or waving our arms for a swimmer to go faster helps, um, we'll do that. And as I said, there are also those races where you want to pretend that's not your swimmer in the pool, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those days something happened inside outside the water. Kind of touching on that as well. I know different swimmers react differently to how things are said to them or even how you coach them. How do you kind of balance the technical side of coaching with also the emotional and mental development of your athletes?
Yeah, really, really critical. I think I will tell you that in terms of evolving as a coach, when I first started, the coach was far more empowered, was far more in charge. It was the coach's way or the highway. It would do things as we tell you to do them and don't ask why.
Hmm.
For today's athlete, the why is everything,
Yeah.
right? We have to continue to evolve to these new generations and understand what their motivations are, understand that their sources, they have so many more resources, right? They can go on to Google and Google anything they want and ask you any question you want. So it's better to be able to explain and talk about the why versus because I said so. So I did a lot of because I said so early in my career. That's how coaches coached, and
Hmm.
athletes said, okay,
Yeah.
because you say so. But now they don't want to respond to because I said so. Right? They want to know why you're doing it. What's the motivation behind doing it? What's the inspiration behind doing it? What are the expected results from doing your why?
Hmm.
So I think it's important to have positive relationships and make it so the athletes know there's an open door, that we're a team,
Hmm.
right? There are shareholders in our company, if you want to, but you all are the shareholders. You all are very, very important. And as time went by in my own personal coaching career, I realized who my best teachers were, and they were my athletes. And that the more I listened, the more I could tune into what they had to say, the more I understood their why or their reason for wanting to, then maybe the better I could approach them, the better I could communicate with them, the better I could understand them, and the better they could understand me. And we would be a team. We wouldn't be coach and swimmer. We would be a team, coach and swimmer. And
Hmm.
we would build these, right? This is why we
Oh.
would we would build that relationship. And that relationship would allow the swimmer to feel comfortable coming to the coach. I tell my swimmers now, which I did not do early on, if it's something you don't like, I want to hear about it. I want to know about it. I want to know what you like, sets you like, practices. If it was a practice you didn't like, you have the right to tell me that was not a well planned practice. That was not a well written practice. That was not a well conceived practice. Never worry about saying it. That way I can be better for you.
Yeah.
And I hope over time, as a coach, or part of my philosophy as I evolved in coaching, was to do that better.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that you always said that I still use in my daily life is a happy swimmer is a fast swimmer.
Yeah.
And so having that open door policy and allowing us to come to you with anything that was going on in our lives, whether it was swimming, whether it was school, whether it was personal, just making sure that you were aware helped our relationship grow and helped there be this fundamental level of trust and respect. And so I think those are the foundations that truly help that coach athlete relationship thrive. Because at the end of the day, we've come a long way in this sport with regards to mental well being and mental health. And people sometimes forget that your mind is one of the biggest muscles that you need in sport. And so having that relationship, having that authenticity, and knowing that you care more than just a time is huge and ultimately leads to that level of camaraderie, like I said, between athlete and coach, but also between athlete and athlete. And it trickles down to the whole team. I mean, even in recruiting trips, athletes will see that level of trust, and they'll want to come as well. Um, so kind of touching on that, how can you talk about the importance of culture within a team, and how you kind of help build that positive culture?
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, I think culture is we we thought we were creating culture and building culture at all coaches believe in that, right? And that's not something that's new to sport in 2020. It's something that's been part of sport forever. So you want to have that positive atmosphere, that positive vibe, that positive culture. But I think culture is shared, right? It has to be shared from the coaching staff to the athlete and from the athlete to the coaches.
Mhm.
I think the most important thing in culture, and you've touched on this, Summer, is relationships. If you have positive relationships, coach to athlete, athlete to coach. That's the foundation for a good culture.
Hmm.
You have to have trust, you have to have honesty, and the athlete has to be willing to allow the coach to be as honest as he or she needs to be in that relationship to bring out the best in the athlete. And also, the athlete can help bring out the best in the coach too.
Hmm.
Um, but I think you need a happy atmosphere. You need an atmosphere where people are allowed to be who they are. If they like to listen to music during practice or dance to it or sing the words to it while they're on their between set time, they should be allowed to do it. If they like to tell jokes and crack up and be sarcastic, it's okay.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's part of what culture is. But culture is also each person, coach and athlete alike, accepting everyone on their team for who they are and what they are, understanding and respecting their beliefs, um, and and being open enough in your heart to allow that person to say what makes them tick, what makes them happy, and what makes them sad or what brings them down. And when you have that open communication between athlete to athlete, athlete to coach, and coach to athlete, then you can develop a sense of belonging and a sense of pride in the organization to which you belong. And the feeling of I want to grow this
Hmm.
organization, I want to grow this culture to be something even more than it is today.
Hmm.
Um, and for example, at NC State, we have different training groups, but we try to promote the same culture throughout the team. And the cultures within each training group are different too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun when those cultures meld and when athletes in the sprint group have a better understanding of what an athlete in the distance group does, and vice versa, because it's hard to understand how a person's body works and cooperates, um, given the different engines that exist
Hmm.
in our sports. So I think teams win, groups don't, and when groups understand one another best, that's when your team culture thrives also.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, when during my time at NC State and now there were different training groups and the training groups altered also depending on the day and depending on the type of practice. And so you had multiple times during the week where you were swimming with different people. And it was cool to see that mix kind of come together. It also kept training fresh. It kept it fun. You'd have a new lane mate every day. And also during Christmas training, when things get very, very hard and you're putting in all of the work that you can, we would make sure that we had special sets and special days where we would do fun practices. So we would switch coaches. So the sprint
Right.
coach would come over to us and we'd lose you for a practice. And then they'd comment on our starts. And I was like, I'm trying. But you get an element kind of everything and you see where everyone in the team is coming from.
Yes.
And that helps tremendously. Now, obviously, within the sport, you want things to progress upwards all the time, but we kind of know that that's not the reality, and there are going to be highs and lows to the sport. So, how do you keep your team and your swimmers motivated during difficult times, such as plateaus, injuries, illnesses? How do you make sure that there's still that positive element within practices?
I believe that there is something good that can come out of every practice and every race performance, regardless of the final result. So
Hmm.
you may not have the fastest swim you wanted either in practice or a meet, but maybe you turned better that day. Maybe you had the best kick set that you ever had. Um, Maybe you learned how to understand fatigue factor during the course of the season. Maybe we as coaches learned, uh-oh, we're pushing too hard, we're pushing too far at this juncture when we see a certain performance at a certain point in time during the season. But I think in practice, one of the things you want to do is try to entertain your swimmers a little bit, whether it's funny comments or sarcastic comments, or allowing them to go back and forth with one another, interject some some happy thoughts, interject some positive thoughts,
Mhm.
just to try to keep stress levels at a little bit more reduced
Yeah.
level.
Hmm.
But practice is stressful because as
Yeah.
coaches, we obviously want you to perform at high levels. We know that we get 2 or 3 hours a day or a session with you. And we have goals. We have a plan um, that we're providing for you, an avenue that you can travel down to get to success. But there are ups and downs. The highway to success is always under construction. So not every day is a perfect day for athletes. Not every day is a perfect day for coaches.
Hmm.
Um, so try to keep it as light as possible while maintaining a high level of a high work ethic and a high level of performance in practice. And sometimes when an athlete's not on or they're off a little bit, maybe sending them to a different group that day, or maybe giving them a session off, or
Hmm.
maybe saying, we're just going to warm up today.
Yeah.
Um, and it helps a lot when an athlete can share before a practice or early on into a practice. This isn't my day.
Hmm.
There's just something that's not right. And then being able to make the appropriate response as a coach by saying, maybe today's a good day for you to just warm down. We got a warm up in, we got the first set in. Let's warm down and regroup and do something different. Sometimes maybe it's just go ride the bicycle
Yeah.
for 30 minutes or take a walk around campus. Just go for a 30-minute walk, breathe good fresh air, and
Hmm.
come back happy. Think positive thoughts. Um, but it's very important to understand or to be able to notice and see in a swimmer when they may be encountering those rough moments.
Hmm.
That's that's an important part of what we do and hopefully what we see or
Yeah.
recognize.
And I will say, I think you are an expert in reading body language. So as a coach, it's not only what athletes are saying, but it's also how they're carrying themselves. I know sometimes I would walk on the pool deck and shoulders would be a little more slouched, head would be a little more down, wouldn't be talking as much, and you would be one of the first people that would notice that. And also, just like having and hearing you talk about how you uplift swimmers, it brings back so many funny memories for me. And now realizing that that's what you were doing is kind of a full circle moment. There are so many times when we would be having a tough practice, we wouldn't necessarily be hitting our pace times, and you would let us know in the funniest way. So even your constructive criticism, you couldn't help but laugh after at the end of it and realize, okay, like it's not the end of the world. Like we need to push harder. You gave it in a way that, yeah, the words were straightforward and they were needed. But you left and you're like, what? What happened? So yeah, I mean, it just kind of brings back that full circle moment for me as well. As a coach, obviously, you focus a lot on your athletes, and you kind of touched on coaches can have bad days too. Um, what is one of the biggest challenges you faced while coaching at the collegiate level?
Wow, there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
A lot of challenging moments out there. Um, I think I worry a lot about the amount of sleep
Mhm.
a college athlete truly gets,
Yeah.
quality sleep. Um, I worry about what they're doing or what they're not doing, but they're in a large environment where there could be a lot of people with different illnesses that can affect the health of our athletes.
Yeah.
Um, I worry when swimmers have bad days and don't know how to get over a bad day or a bad practice. Um, really, part of my philosophy for anybody that I am blessed to coach is I want them through the course of their career to become the best human being they can be. That's the most important thing.
Hmm.
To become the best student they can be, the most complete student they can be while they're in school, and to become the best athlete that they are able to be during that 4 year period of time. So there's three priorities, and I worry when I see an athlete struggling either with their academics, um, or with their personal life,
Mhm.
because this is a challenging time, right? You have boyfriends and girlfriends, and you have breakups, and you have friendships that grow apart, and um, you have those moment you have those moments with your coaches,
Mhm.
right? That are hard, that sometimes puts you all in a down place.
Mhm.
Um, and so there's just so many challenges that are out there. I find swimming slow to probably be one of the least of those challenges, because that's not hard to overcome. You all are great at this level.
Yeah.
Everybody's a really, really good athlete. You're in that upper 2%. It's
Mhm.
just finding a way to bring back the mental comfort that will allow you to find the physical comfort to push forward.
Mhm.
So that's a big challenge. Um, I think it's always challenging when an athlete doesn't do a best time at the end of the season. That's hard. That's hard to know that you put in all that work, all that time, all that effort, all that discipline, all that sacrifice, and it didn't result in what you had hoped for, or maybe what the coach had hoped for.
Mhm.
But the other side of it is that's money in the bank. And sooner or later, because I'm a believer that work works, and that hard work always pays off. Somewhere, sometime, somehow, whatever you did, what all that discipline, all that effort, all that dedication, all that sacrifice, it'll come back to you.
Yeah.
And I try to remind swimmers that it's never wasted. Not, and if you believe in and truly gave it all the effort that you had, it'll come back. It wasn't instant reward. And in today's society, everybody wants instant results. You
Yeah.
don't have to go to a library to look up the answer to a question anymore. You say, Siri, what is this?
Yeah.
So it's a more and more over the last 10 to 15 years, instant gratification is something
Yeah.
I that younger people want, but they
Mhm.
can't always have it. And you have to try to show them and teach them that the process is important, the sacrifice is important, the journey is wonderful, and that the end result of that journey will always, you'll look back on the journey and say that was worth it.
Yeah. And I think especially for college coaches, every college coach out there is kind of in an interesting place because you ultimately your title within an organization says associate head coach, coach, but you're actually mentoring these young people throughout a very important time in their life. I mean, like you said, a lot goes into those 4 years academically, a lot goes into it socially. They're figuring out who they are when they're away from home. And so, yeah, you're worrying about times, but seeing that bigger picture and seeing that you're helping these individuals grow and become better people, I think is something that I really took away from my time at NC State and being coached by you as well. I mean, times in swimming are important at the end of the day. When you Google something, that's what pops up next to your name. But the journey is so much more important, even if you leave the sport not necessarily on a high note. It's still money in the bank, maybe not necessarily for an end time, but all of those characteristics and qualities that you learned along the way, the grit, the mental toughness, the respect, time management, that all will still continue past when your hand touched the wall. So that's really important. And it's interesting that you touched on that as one of the challenges because it truly also shows how selfless you are as a person because none of the challenges you listed were necessarily about yourself or things that are difficult about coaching. It's about how you care about your athletes and who they become in the water and out of the water. So, kind of going into that with mentorship and development, which are huge qualities for coaches, what qualities do you think are essential for athletes to succeed at the college level?
Wow, that's great. I love the word you use, grit. I think that's one of the most important assets. Honesty.
Hmm.
I think that's very, very important. You have to have a strong work ethic. You have to be you have to be undaunted by challenge.
Mm-hmm.
You have to embrace challenge. You have to embrace newness, right? We are all blessed because we get the cream of the crop, the best, the 2% that are swimming at Division I are the best of the best. But somebody made you the best of the best first.
Mm-hmm.
So a Fred Lewis who helped create, and your dad, they were your coaches. They were people who then trusted you to Braden and to me, and trusted your brother and sister to Greg Troy and to Anthony Nesty. So we take an athlete who's been in a system, right? In
Mm-hmm.
a philosophy, and you're coming to something totally new.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is a challenge. And we have to hope that you are able to embrace the new challenge. You're able to accept that I'm about ready to do something different, something I've probably never done before in my life.
Yeah.
How do I handle this? Um, so it's really important that we blend and we mold your past experience
Mm-hmm.
with your current experience, and how will that make for the best future experience?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but am I answering your question?
Yeah, no,
Am I
you're
hitting on
doing.
this one?
Yes.
Um, you got the athlete faces challenges that, and the coach faces a challenge. That's a challenge we go through together, figuring
Mm-hmm.
one another out. What makes Summer tick? What makes athlete B tick? What makes athlete C tick? We have to put it all together and create a big puzzle and try to find ways to blend the philosophies of several different club coaches into the philosophy of this team, so
Mm-hmm.
that it seems like a seamless movement
Yeah.
forward, and a movement forward that allows for continued success.
Mm-hmm. And it truly is an art form. I mean, college coaches and club coaches, you guys, I would classify as artists, because, like you said, you're taking a high school athlete who can come from any variety of background. I know some club teams only practice once a day. Some club teams do five doubles. Some club teams, they never touch a weight. Others are doing full Olympic movements. So making sure that you're not setting the athlete up to ultimately be overwhelmed, making sure that they're comfortable coming to you with past training. And I think that a lot of college coaches benefit from talking to high school coaches, because you guys have been recruiting for a very long time. You develop relationships with these coaches, so you ultimately know where an athlete has come from in the past, so you can help develop them to succeed and keep growing while under your guidance as well.
I agree with that. I think club coaches are a critical component to the athlete's long-term success.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's something that I think I communicate better with club coaches now than I did early in my career.
Mhm.
When I was a young coach, I was somewhat intimidated by the club coaches because they had all the success. I had done nothing. I was an unproven, I mean, a nobody. And you have to work really, really hard to establish yourself and earn the trust
Mhm.
of the club coaches. When I first started coaching collegiately, I made two what I felt were very important phone calls. I called Doc Councilman, who was at that time one of the greatest coaches in the United States and the greatest coaches in the world. And I explained to him that this was my first opportunity as a head coach. And would he mind if I called him once a month or so just to ask a few questions?
Mhm.
And he was gracious enough to say, yes, you can do that. And I developed a relationship with him. And I also called Don Easterling, who was the best coach in the Atlantic Coast Conference at the time. His teams were winning everything.
Mhm.
And I called him and asked if I could do the same thing with him, if he would be a mentor, if he would be somebody I could rely upon and trust. And as I went through my coaching career and got a little bit better handle on what was going on, then I had my peers. in the coaching profession, and several of whom I called upon all the time to listen to ask questions of, to learn from. Even though we had to stand across the deck and compete against one another,
Yeah.
I still trusted their judgment. I still trusted their words. I still trusted their advice to try to continue to reach the highest levels of excellence that I could as a coach to help my athletes get better.
hmm And I think you touch on this a lot during our conversations, but athletes are growing throughout their time. I mean, they go to practice and they're working hard day in and day out, but coaches are as well. I mean, you develop throughout your coaching journey, you see what others are doing, you advance, you evolve, you personalize and cater towards the athletes. And ultimately, collaboration is huge in the sport, and making sure that even if you are a coach, you also have mentors. So you're mentoring young athletes, but as a coach, you can also reach out across the pool deck and ask questions and see why and see how you can help your athletes with something that maybe someone else is doing. Um, so kind of going back to some challenging times in the sport, and a lighter ending result. Can you share a memorable moment from your career when you saw an athlete overcome adversity and kind of grow as a result from what they faced?
Oh, Summer, there's lots of those.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There's there's a couple of those every single year, but
Yes.
I don't know if there's one single moment of adversity that stands out more than others, because each of them are different and unique to that
Mm-hmm.
athlete. But I've seen athletes overcome mental distress and work their way back. I've seen them overcome physical distress. I've seen them overcome loss of family members.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Too much of that. I've seen them over. I think the toughest thing for me is when we've seen. I'll give an example. Claire Crippen,
Mm-hmm.
who swam, is the younger sister of Fran Crippen. Fran passed away during Claire's senior season,
Mm-hmm.
and I have never seen someone be so strong and be so kind and
Mm-hmm.
be so wonderful, um, and having gone through so much.
Yeah.
Uh, just that is probably one of the most, if not the single most challenging um, moment I've had as a coach.
Yeah.
Um, but to see Claire's grace and to see her kindness and to see her embrace everybody that was embracing her, she embraced more people back harder than you could ever imagine. And she had an incredible season.
Yeah.
Um, and her sister Teresa was no different at Florida. The Crippen family. It's just what they went through and how they responded, and how they lifted the spirits and the souls of everyone around them. That's probably, if you wanted me to find one,
Yeah.
that's one that at this second stands out. But there are many, many.
Yes,
Um,
I'm sure. And I mean, each one, depending on the person and depending on the athlete, impacts and shows differently. And it's easy when you see a swimmer on a screen or when you're watching the Olympics or nationals, all you see is that one little moment. You only see the race, you only see the reaction. If they win, you see an interview. But I think unless you're a swimmer or an athlete, you don't really understand everything that goes into that moment. And a lot of times it's easy to kind of objectify athletes and just say, oh, like that was terrible, comments online, this, that, and the other. But I do think that swimming is a very cohesive and intertwined group, and we all uplift each other even through these down times because we ultimately know what goes into all of these moments that make us better. We kind of touched on it in the beginning, but you've had a very long career in collegiate swimming, and you've seen a lot of advancements throughout the sport. What changes have you seen in the sport of swimming over the years, both in terms of training methods and also in competitions?
Great question. I think early on in my career, the coaching philosophy across the board was one size fits all, and it didn't matter whether you were a sprinter or a stroke athlete or a middle distance athlete or a distance swimmer. You did the same workout, you did the same training. um, Coaches felt more was better,
Yep.
that the more you could do, the tougher you were, that when all was said and done and it came time to taper, that's why you would be at your best, because you did more.
Yeah.
Now it's um, now more is not necessarily better.
Hmm.
There's a time and a place for higher volume. There's a time and a place for speed work. But I think we as coaches, I think, have evolved and we understand the science of the sport better, the
Hmm.
real science of the sport. Um, I think there are more opportunities for us to learn and grow, because we've seen there are more coaches who actually specialize
Hmm.
in coaching sprinters, or who specialize in coaching backstrokers, or who specialize in coaching distance athletes. Um, and coaching staffs now are aligned such
Yep.
that if this is the strength of Coach A, then I want Coach A to work with athletes that match his strengths. If this is the strength of Coach B, I want to put those athletes with that coach.
Hmm.
And larger coaching staffs allow you to do that. When I first started, I was the only coach.
Hmm.
So it was hard for me to run 3 or 4 different workouts. So a lot of what we did was the same. Didn't
Hmm.
matter that you were a 50, 100 specialist or a 1,000-mile specialist. We were doing the same things. Um, so I think we've evolved tremendously relative to our understanding of the science in swimming.
Hmm.
We've evolved tremendously relative to our understanding of the strengths of coaches. Coaches have strengths, so let's make sure that this coach's strength matches this athlete's strength. I
Yeah.
think that's something that's happening better. I think um, what we're doing in the weight room, what we're doing on dry land, how we're bringing our swimmers through phases, strength and conditioning phases, not trying to overwhelm them at too young of an age, not trying to think that weights are everything at age 12, 13, 14, but allowing the athlete to develop flexibility
Hmm.
and mobility. We never did those things back in the day, right? But now we understand it, and we can teach our younger swimmers proper technique.
Yeah.
Um, and if we do a good job of that at the age group level, then those kids are going to have an opportunity to see success. They don't have to, if they have a 45-minute practice, it doesn't have to be all swimming. It can be dedicated, certain percentage of it can be dedicated to drill work and skill work, to
Hmm.
kicking. Um, and they'll gain and be better more from it, because they laid a better, stronger foundation than they would if all they did was swim.
Hmm.
And I think we understand that better now than we did 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think like I came from a background of very high yardage and that was kind of the norm. But as I moved throughout my swimming journey and into college, I still put in a lot of yardage, but a lot of it was more focused on what I needed as an athlete. We had a lot more data, we had a lot more tools. We used heart rates, we used the color theory that Urbanchek coined within the weight room. I mean, even our weights were tailored to our abilities. So I wasn't necessarily a very strong and powerful athlete. So I needed more time in the pool. So I only did weights 2 times a week, whereas the sprinters would be in there 5 days a week. So with that, we have a lot of advancements in technology, a lot of advancements in the data that we get back from athletes. How do you think all of this information is impacting the way that we train and compete today?
Wow, that's an awesome question. We're using a product called Flex right this year. It's our
Mhm.
first year using it. And just the other day, and it monitors heart rate. And at the end of the practice, we can upload all this data. But we were looking at the data on one of our athletes, and we saw during a certain set that her heart rate was off the charts.
Mhm.
And we use that data to say, we think you're getting sick.
Yeah.
And we pulled her out of the water and we gave her a day or two off. And she was in fact getting sick.
Hmm.
Um, but I think the fact that we had that, we could see that, it allowed us to get her out, allowed us to recover. Um, and she got better within 48 to 72 hours. Whereas if we had not had that data and not been looking at it literally during practice and saying, why in the heck is that heart rate so high?
Yeah.
We could have pushed her past her limits. And I used the word earlier, I said the word recovery. I
Hmm.
think that's something that coaches are doing a much better job of understanding what recovery is and how recovery works. And not that it used to be recovery was, what do you mean recovery? We don't need to recover. We have to get stronger. Now we realize that the vital importance of recovery. And that might be something that's only really happened in the last 10 years, that we've learned to understand and appreciate recovery versus what we would have earlier described as the importance of hard work.
Hmm.
There's a Now you learn how to blend the hard work with the recovery so
Yeah.
that the athlete is able to actually can perform at a higher level.
Yeah. You have to train sometimes smarter and not harder so that you're able to get those end results instead of just keep beating down until you can't do it no
You
more.
can't get up anymore. That's right. So
Yeah.
smarter, not harder is something I've had to learn.
You've obviously had a lot of athletes kind of come through your programs and you've seen them graduate and move through all of the motions in life. But what advice specifically would you have for young athletes who want to swim at the college level, specifically Division One?
There is nothing better than being a collegiate athlete. And I'm not going to throw it at just at Division One, because
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing some changes now in Division One. As you know,
Yeah.
there's going to be, perhaps there will be roster limitations imposed. So I would just say, if you want to be a swimmer in college, continue to work as hard as you can work, communicate well with your club coaches, communicate well with the colleges that are recruiting you.
Mm-hmm.
Know where, be realistic,
Mm-hmm.
and know what the best schools for you to entertain are. Um, and find a place where you can go and be happy and be successful and realize your dream as a collegiate athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is not going to be as easy to be a Division One athlete in a Power Four conference as it was just 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, so but I absolutely want to be there. Okay, then if that's your dream and if that's your goal, pursue it with all your might.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Communicate that dream to your coaches, communicate that dream to your parents,
Mm-hmm.
communicate that dream to your teammates and your peers, and do the things in life, do the right things in life that'll give you the best chance to be a Division One swimming athlete.
Yeah.
Um, but even if I think we're going to see many more schools in swimming, what's been labeled as mid-major schools, are going to now start having better programs and faster programs, because the good athletes are going to spread out now. They can't all go to the same 20 schools.
Yeah.
There's actually going to be more opportunity
Mm-hmm.
out there. Um, it just might not be at the place you thought you wanted to swim.
Mm-hmm.
So first and foremost, though, prioritize your education.
Mm-hmm.
Find a school that has the major that, if you know what you want to study, that will allow you to have success in life. Um, but there's a place for everybody that wants to swim. Just you're this athlete that we're recruiting now, these next few years, we're going to have to, as coaches, we're going to have to be honest with them, and they're going to have to be more honest with themselves than they've ever been, because there aren't as many roster spots to go around as there have been.
Yeah. And I mean, I know we've kind of touched on how swimming has evolved from even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but it's continually evolving, and even the scope of what we know right now won't be true in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. So it will be an interesting landscape to kind of navigate for both the athlete and the coaches as well.
Yeah, you have to be adaptable. You have to be
Mhm.
willing to adjust. You have to be willing to accept change
Yeah.
and figure out within that changing mode, what do I have to do to realize my dream or to achieve the successes I hope to achieve.
Yeah. And now, kind of flipping the question around, what advice would you have for young coaches who are just starting out in their careers?
Um, there is so much to learn. I would say, just have as open a mind as you can possibly have.
Hmm.
Find mentors that you can reach out to. Um, d- Prioritize relationships, prioritize um, learning as much as you can and getting to know your swimmers as best you can. Don't be afraid to do the dirty work,
Hmm.
right? Don't be afraid to start at an age group level. Don't be afraid to start as an intern. Don't be afraid to start as a graduate assistant. Don't be afraid to start as a volunteer. That's actually the best way to learn the business.
Hmm.
Um, yep.
I have found within my experience that it is very rare to come across a coach who has been in the sport as long as you have. We do see a lot of turnover. We see a lot of burnout. So what would your advice be to coaches or athletes who are currently going through a phase of burnout in their life?
I think every day is a new day and every day is a day to find happiness,
Hmm.
right? I personally have a passion for what I do. I don't know what the source of the passion is or why it's there, but I think the source of the passion is the athlete.
Yeah.
To me, that's what makes it worth waking up every single morning, because every day is a new day. Every day is a fresh day. Every day is a chance to have a new beginning.
Hmm.
Every day is to build on what happened the day before. Um, and every day is a day to embrace growth,
Hmm.
to embrace friendships, I don't know why I have I think the passion for me comes from the swimmers. I
Hmm.
just I just love saying good morning to them and seeing them start their day and having the courage to do what hardly anybody wants to do. And I think swimmers are courageous people.
Yeah.
Um, I really do. I think there has to be a certain je ne sais quoi to waking up at that hour of the morning and
Yeah.
diving into water. There has
Hmm.
to be a certain love and an element to what we do. Um, so for me to go and just be able to start my day by having a good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, each time somebody walks in the door,
Yeah.
that's pretty darn happy, right?
Hmm.
So what how often do you get to start your day by telling somebody, good morning, here we go. This is going to be an awesome day. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Um, and their response is to get in that pool and to push themselves
Hmm.
and to not be afraid, but to embrace and accept and love that challenge. I mean, that's so rewarding to me that a human being would love the challenge that I'm throwing out there for them, knowing that, okay, maybe today this guy's he's gonna try to get the better of me.
Yeah.
And I like it when I lose, when I write something really, really hard, a practice that's difficult, and
Yeah.
the athlete wins. And I like saying, you won today.
Hmm. And I mean, we all feed off of energy. And so the energy that swimmers give, the energy that coaches give, it kind of encapsulates. And like I said, you kind of feed off of each other. So even just giving a smile and saying good morning, it's psychologically proven that smiling will improve your mood, even if you're not necessarily happy in that given moment. And then the events of practice unfold. And I find it's hard not to enjoy it at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one coach that taught me how to say good morning the best was Jack Bowerly. Um, he- he's one of those peer group that I relied upon a lot for guidance and for help and for just to talk about the sport a lot. But I remember one day I was at one of his practices and he was good morninging everybody to death, and I realized I need to do a better job of that. I need to
Yeah.
make sure that I'm welcoming everybody into a special moment in time.
Yeah. I mean, we all learn from each other, and you can pick up pieces of elements that you like from other coaches and incorporate them into your own philosophies and practices as well.
Yeah,
So
100%.
I know we've touched on a lot of different topics and you've given a lot of great advice and a lot of great stories that hopefully coaches, athletes, parents, people who just enjoy swimming will learn from. But kind of ending it on a lighthearted note. What has been one of your favorite memories from your coaching days, whether it's a funny team moment or an emotional victory at the end of a season?
Well, I will tell you that, wow, when I first started coaching, I wanted to take a University of Virginia swim team. It was in the basement, in the cellar, one of the worst teams in the ACC. I just made each year I made little goals, little steps forward. Can we get from eighth to seventh? Can we get from seventh to sixth? Can we get somebody to NCAAs? Can we get somebody to score at NCAAs? Can we become a top 25 team? Can we produce multiple first team All Americans? Can we get a national championship swimmer? Can we get an Olympian? So I kept giving myself different challenges. And each time some of those challenges and goals were met, it would push me as a coach to try to find the next level of coaching, so to speak.
Mhm.
So winning the first team, and I'm a team first guy, winning the first men's team title in at the ACC was one of the biggest thrills of my life. Winning the first women's team title
Mhm.
was one of the biggest thrills of my life. Um, I remember stories. There's lots of stories, but um, how the teams would try to come together and different things that they did that it was their doing, and I wanted them to do it to create unity and to create joy within the groups. Stupid stories like Ed Moses, who went on to win Olympic medals and NCAA titles, was an incredibly explosive, powerful guy, and nobody would want to throw the med ball with him because he threw it so hard. So it was up to me to be the one that threw the med ball. I still have the broken finger.
Oh
He
boy.
broke blood vessels in every finger in my hand. Um, but being able to stand in there and do the dry land with him,
Mhm.
um, doing some years I would do the entire weight program with the team. Um, I'll never forget my first NCAA championship with women was in Cleveland, and we got a flat tire in the car as we were
Oh.
driving to the meet, and it was snowing and it was bitter cold on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and I got out to change a tire. I'd been out changing a tire for 20 minutes. And finally, one of the girls came out and said, "What's wrong with you? Don't you know how to change a tire?" And I said, "Of course I know how to change a tire. I had the car jacked up, but I had the tire turned backwards and I could." She said, "Coach." I said, "What?" She goes, "Turn the tire around, would
Oh
you?"
boy.
Um, so that was a good funny moment on a long drive. But
Yeah.
there are so many fun stories and moments that you can share. I always thought it would be interesting if one swimmer every year kept a diary of funny, notable moments of the season as it went
Yeah.
on. The 30 or 40 chapters you could put together at the end of a career would be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm sure.
but there are lots of stories and lots of special moments um, that I embrace, that I'll always embrace. You know, the love that the swimmers have brought to my children and to my wife, and hopefully the love that we've brought back to them.
Mhm.
That's always been important. The great appreciation and sacrifice that other people have made. So just not me, but all coaches, that our families make, that our children make, that your mom and dad and your brothers and sisters that you all have made. Um, I think we can't take that for granted. We have to know that that's why we do what we do, and that's what brings joy to our hearts. And hopefully we can pass some of that joy back down through the generations of swimmers.
Yeah. And I mean, even just hearing you speak and hearing the joy that you have for every athlete that you've had the chance to coach and every program that you've been at. It speaks volumes to you as a person. And I know I mentioned earlier, you are a very selfless individual. So a lot of the memories and a lot of your favorite moments ultimately come back to your athletes. But my time with you as an athlete, and then even beyond when I'm in my professional career right now, like you are a true mentor in the sport and you touch every life that you have the chance to come in. And I'm very fortunate to be where I am today. And a lot of it is because of you. So I want to thank you for that as well.
Well, I want to thank you. And sits right on my desk. Do you know who that girl is?
The
We
one
had a,
without the gray hair.
you'll never have any of that.
No, but I want to thank you for just taking the time to sit down with me today and to answer all of these questions. I know that it'll help a lot of coaches and a lot of athletes out there.
I hope it does, Summer. Thanks for spending the morning with me.
As always, I would like to thank the International Swim Coaches Association. Without their help and support, this podcast would not be possible. Hopefully, you had a lot of fun listening to Coach Mark Bernardino. I know I had a great time catching up with him and learning about his coaching journey and how he supports his athletes. If you want to stay up to date on all things Lane 1 Making Waves, be sure to give us a like and follow us on the following streaming platforms. And we'll see you again soon.